We have now hit the month of August. Mitch, I don't think I need to explain anymore. You know exactly what that means.
Yeah, it means the final countdown has started. We're about 4 weeks away from kickoff, and we are right in the start of preview season, so can't wait to start talking about it.
Let's jump in. Talking Illinois high school football.
If your goals are as high as you talk about, tonight's the night you go out and just take one more step.
It's a view from the West.
And it starts right now!
Welcome, everyone, to View from the West podcast, the podcast covering Illinois high school football on the western side of the state of Illinois. I'm your host, Greg Armstrong, joined once again, as always, by Mitch Stormer. Mitch, we jump right in to preview season. Here we go. It seems like the summer has kind of, wore on, and we've been itching to get going. It's preview season. We start with the Northwest Upstate Illini and 8-man football. I'm fired up. I'm ready to go here.
Yeah, I mean, you make it sound like summer is dragged on. It seems like it's gone by too fast in my household. But, either way, we're in August now. And like you said at the jump, that only means one thing, that we're getting closer and closer to kickoff. We had the Hall of Fame game on, and that, kind of kickstarts it a little bit too. So, yeah, man, we're ready. We're fired up. And what a better way to get started than the best conference in Illinois.
Are the Bears 1-0? Are they officially 1-0? Can we say that?
Yeah, sure. 1-0 through 3 quarters or whatever that was. Yeah.
That's right. Well, it's preview season. We're previewing the Northwest Upstate Illini and 8-man football, as we said. If we're talking about that, we bring in the man, Kyle Kampmier, NUICfootball.com. Kyle, it's good to see you again. If I'm talking to you, that means that high school football is here. We're ready.
Absolutely. I mean, we say it every year. This is the best time of the year. We're getting ready to get geared up, getting ready for kickoff. There's a lot of big games on the docket. You guys have already looked at the schedule, put out that podcast a couple weeks ago. And, yeah, we're right here. We're ready to go. And, man, it's exciting to be back, obviously, for the NUIC things, looking for another team to make their way to Bloomington and a potential state championship. I tell you what, there's a lot of teams that stand in the way to make that happen this year, so it should be a lot of fun.
All right, Mitch, before we get into things, we got to thank our sponsors at Breedlove Sporting Goods, the podcast View from the West, powered by Breedlove's. Mitch, tell them what they need to know.
Yeah, I mean, the fans, they already know that tonight's episode is brought to you and everyone by our friends at Breedlove Sporting Goods, Western Illinois' premier sporting goods store for uniforms, apparel, equipment, awards. Boy, what else? How about online team stores? They provide all the same sporting goods services as the big nationwide companies, but with a faster turnaround, and their uniform pricing is a fraction of the cost you're probably used to. They offer brands such as Adidas, Under Armour, Nike, and they are extremely responsive with any inquiries. With a primary focus on the western side of the great state of Illinois, Breedlove Sporting Goods is the fastest way to outfit your team. Check them out on Facebook or at breedlovesports.com. Or go right to the source. Shoot Cal Breedlove an email at calbreedlove@gmail.com for more information.
And Mitch, it's an exciting season we're kicking off here with our partnership with Breedloves. We got an online store open, ready to go right now as you listen to this podcast. Mitch, we got our own View from the West merch ready to roll. Which shirt are you going to buy? Which shirt are you excited about?
Ooh, I don't know. Let me put it this way. I'm more excited to see what fan bases wear this year. I think we put out some options that would look really good on a Friday night under the lights, big rivalry game on the field, rowdy fans in the stands, hopefully wearing shirts supporting their school. So as much as I like all the shirts and all the offerings we're going to have, I'm most excited to see which fan base, maybe be the most representative of these shirts.
Mitch, the shirt I thought you'd say you're most excited about is the run, touchdown, repeat. That's your, right. Even as a former quarterback, you love the good run attack.
If you saw my passing stats, you'd know why I like that shirt better than the passing ones. But yeah, I'm excited for all of them. Like I said, Breedlove did a great job. You did a great job mocking these up. And again, I'm just excited to see them roll out and put some shirts on the fans' backs.
Absolutely. So we have our View from the West merchandise ready to roll. It's an online store available right now. It'll be available through the end of the month. We'll get the date out there when the store will close, but you can head out to X right now. Find us on X. You can find the link to the store. It's available. Obviously, we have some View from the West merch. We also have some rivalry merch. That's what I'm really excited about, Mitch. The county line rivalry between Mercer County and Rock Ridge is back. We have shirts covering that one, several shirts covering that one. We also have the trophy game in Kewanee and Princeton. We got a t-shirt and a hoodie available to promote that one. Two of the oldest rivalries in the state of Illinois in this area, Kewanee and Princeton, but also in the Western Big Six, you got Rock Island and Moline. We got some shirts promoting that one. And right here in the Northwest Upstate Illini, which we're about to talk about, the Wooden Shoe Bowl is back, Mitch. I know that's a rivalry game near and dear to your heart. You've seen the mock-up for that one. The Wooden Shoe belongs where, Mitch?
Well, if they would have, made it a thing for the playoff game, it would have resided in Morrison where it should reside. But, we'll let them settle that difference, I think, in week 9 this year. So, yeah, the game's back. We got the shirts to prove it, and that trophy in all its glory will be up for grabs.
So find us on X, find us on Twitter, View from West Pod. You can go out, find the t-shirt you want there, whether it's View from the West merch or a merch supporting the rivalry that you're most interested in. Go out there, find your t-shirt, pick it up, have it ready for the season. So here we go. Our high school football previews in the 8-man ranks. Maybe one of the most impressive teams we covered all year last year, Mitch, in Amboy. So this year, the way that the divisions shake out in 8-man football is that Amboy will be in the West Division. So they'll be in the West Division alongside of Ridgewood, West Central, Bushnell Prairie City, Flanagan, Cornell, Woodland, Galva, Peoria Heights, and West Prairie. So a little bit of a shakeup this year. Kyle, I'll bring you in right off the start here. What do you think of this shakeup? Because Amboy had always been kind of in the, northern, western part of the state, and now they get moved over a little bit. So they're, playing some teams more north of central of the state.
Yeah, I mean, I think the shakeup is a good thing. I think it's something that a lot of the coaches wanted. There was a lot of focus from the Southern coaches this past year on how they needed to make things better. Obviously, a lot of people took to my rankings and they took it to heart that we had a lot more Northern teams ranked than Southern teams. Unfortunately, as the past years have shown, it kind of worked itself out the way that we thought it would. Obviously, there was a couple surprise teams like Martinsville that did make another semifinal run. But at the end of it, it kind of mixes up some of that stuff so that there's a little bit, or an attempt to get a little bit more parity across the board, try to level that out. But it really doesn't matter at the end of the day, the way that 8-man does their playoff polls and the brackets anyway. But I do like it as far as competition goes. Taking a look at some of these games, you got a couple of these games where you got teams playing each other twice in a schedule where one counts as a non-conference game. The second one will count as a conference game just to fill schedules because there's 30 teams. And how many divisions we got this year? 5, I think.
I believe there is, let's see, the West, South, North, 4, and East. So just 4, yeah.
Still 4, but 2 more teams join, obviously, or technically 3 teams join. So we're up to 30 teams playing now. So
yep.
The shakeup's good. I think it looks good. It is odd seeing Amboy out, like you said, always in that area with the NUIC, but it kind of splits that out. And I'm interested to see how it plays out.
So when you look at the Northern Division or the North Division in 8-man football, that's where you get a lot of the teams that we'll be talking about today. You have Ashton Franklin Center, River Ridge, Alden Hebron, Hiawatha, Milledgeville, Orangeville, Polo, Rockford Christian Life, West Carroll, who's new to 8-man this year. We'll talk about them in a minute. And then South Beloit. So before we get into that North Division, I want to start with the teams in the West, because obviously Amboy and Ridgewood were playing for a state championship last year. Amboy came away with the convincing win. We'll start with the Clippers here. Head coach Scott Payne, they're defending state champions. They were a team that I think all 3 of us had circled at the start of the season. and they lived up to expectation all year long. They ran the gauntlet here. They finished the job. They returned some starters. They returned some strength. They got a few pieces to fill in here or there. But Mitch, this has got to be a team that's, again, near or at the top of our predictions, I would think.
Yeah, I think so. There's no question in my mind about that, just based off their showing from that state championship game that you referenced. But really, the body of work the last 3 seasons, 3 straight semifinal appearances, back-to-back state final appearances. They got some guys coming back, like you said, some playmakers, some names that we mentioned quite a bit in that state championship game. But it'll be interesting for Amboy because they do have to also replace some things, and I think that offensive line that got them so much success last year will look a little bit revamped. But when you got Eddie Jones at quarterback, you're going to make a lot of things happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Kyle, I'm guessing that, when the season gets rolling here, Amboy's going to be at the top, near the top of your rankings in the 8-man football.
Well, it's kind of like that night in Monmouth when we got on the podcast right after that romp of Ridgewood in the state championship game that just had everybody in shock. Right off the bat, we were talking about, is Amboy the team to beat again for next year? And to be quite honest, as you listen to how a lot of these teams have lost some seniors, have some returners, there's a lot of teams that we're going to talk about tonight that are in that same situation. They have good returners coming back, but they have some good holes that they need to refill too. But Amboy is definitely there. They, like Mitch said, they've made 3 consecutive semifinal appearances since joining the 8-man ranks. They've been in back-to-back state championships. They know what it takes, and they do. They have a good array of players that are coming back, and I think when you take a look at what they have coming up, I think that they can continue to build on what they have been able to accomplish so far over the past 3 seasons.
Yeah, I mean, Eddie Jones back at quarterback and DB. You have Cody Wynn back at DB. Quinn Leffelman, a name that was very impactful on that offense. He's a fullback defensive end. Braden Klein, Caleb Sugars back. Sugars is one of the linemen back, but they do need to replace a lot on that offensive line. And that was a huge key to that success. I mean, you saw in that championship game, the offense was explosive, and that line was a huge part of it. Mitch, you watched that game, and you could tell that, that line was making huge holes right off the bat.
Yeah, quick scores, often. So, yeah, especially when you're playing that style of football, right? There's maybe, I don't want to say more emphasis on the line, but because those plays come a little quicker, it puts a different emphasis on the blocks. And so, yeah, I think nailed on the head that Amboy has a lot of firepower, but they're going to have those big boys up front to do or have the same results last year if they want to do that again this year.
Yep, absolutely. Well, let's move on to the team that challenged them in that state championship game, and the team that really went toe-to-toe with them in the regular season as well. That's something I think kind of gets forgotten about a little bit after the state championship result, is that Ridgewood put up a great game against Amboy in the regular season. The Ridgewood Spartans, head coach Pat Elder, they were 7-2 in the regular season. Obviously, like we talked about, went to the state championship against Amboy. They bring back a lot of guys. They have good depth returning in the backfield. Kyle, I feel like this is one of those teams that kind of had to earn your respect last year. And I think getting into that state championship game, did they catch your eye by the end of the year?
Yeah, when you take a look at it, obviously the 2022 season was their first year in 8-man. They made a good run that year. They were 8-1. They lost in the quarterfinals to Polo, which was a really good game. I believe the final was like 38-32 or 38-33, something right around that ballpark in that one. So you knew that Coach Elder had a team that was able to make the plays and be able to play with the hierarchy of 8-man football. And last year, if you take a look, their 2 losses were to Polo and to Amboy. And if I remember correctly, I believe they were back-to-back weeks.
They were close. Yeah, I'd have to look it up, but they were really close in the season.
Yeah, they were back-to-back weeks. They lost to Polo first, 48-44, and then they lost to Amboy in week 5, 48-42. So
really close games against two great teams.
So I think right there in its own right kind of proved that they could be there. And really the more shocking one was the one where they stayed close with Amboy, because honestly, I really felt like Amboy was the team to beat. They were going to run the table, just because they had so much returning talent, with coming off of a state runner-up the year before. And that was really, outside of that game and then their game with Milledgeville, those are the only games that they were really close in the whole season. So when I was doing score comparisons, I was like, yeah, Ridgewood doesn't really stand a chance. They're a formidable team. Obviously, they're ranked in our top 10. Really, I think we had them top 5 most of the year. But yeah, I didn't give them much of a shot. But when the bracket broke out and they got the 9 seed, I was like, oh man, that's a pretty low seed for a team with Ridgewood's caliber, because you just knew that they had the abilities, and we talked about it in the playoff show, how they had the ability to make it to Monmouth, and they did.
Yeah. Mitch, read me through some of the guys they got coming back, some names we recognize for sure.
Yeah, no question. And one thing, if I can circle back, one thing I forgot to mention in the Amboy preview, one thing that's good for Ridgewood is that when they match up with Amboy twice in that regular season, they don't have to see Brennan Blaine anymore, who just dominated that state championship game. So just reverting back to Amboy real quick, that's obviously a huge piece that they need to replace. But good news for Ridgewood, they don't need to see them in those 2 regular season matchups. But Roy Sandberg's back, leading that backfield and being an anchor as a linebacker. Wes Sandberg as well, tight end on the offensive side. You got Gavin Franks in that linebacking core, Owen Anderson, Sean Watt, big-time defensive guys. Yeah, they're going to have good depth here. I really like who they have coming back. And the biggest question is what they're going to do at quarterback. Riley Couture is out, or graduated, I should say. And same thing with Amboy. They have to replace some guys up front. And they're going to have to do that pretty quickly if they want to make similar sort of run as they did last year.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to follow in that, in that newly formed West division where, you had 2 teams that made it to the state championship game, both in the same division. Who else, will compete with them? Will these 2 teams be on top? Mitch, what do you got?
Yeah, so I probably will be on top. But Kyle, let me ask you, how does that work? How do they determine what game is a conference game, which one's a non-conference game?
So the way that they have it set up, looking at I8FA's website, the first game is going to be the non-conference game, and the second matchup will be the conference game. So they play each other week 1 and then again in week 5. The week 5 game will be that conference matchup.
Interesting. Okay.
It's just fascinating that they match up twice in a season. You get that state championship game rematch twice in a season and once in week 1. So yeah, that'll be interesting to follow along with for sure. Well, should we move into the North Division here? Get into the kind of the heart of our 8-man coverage here. A lot of teams we cover. We'll start with Orangeville. Head coach Scott Jones had a 5-4 regular season last year. They return a handful on both sides of the ball. Kyle, what do you see in Orangeville this year?
Right now it's hard to say. They lost some key players. They have some key players coming back, but there's really, they're going to have some complications, I think, because a lot of their play last year ran through Cody Worth, their quarterback. He's gone, so now they're going to have to find somebody to step up to be in that role. Hayden Schofield was a wide receiver and a DB, primarily played mostly defense, and he was only a freshman last year, so he's only going to be a sophomore this year. There's a lot of things that they're going to have to do in order to get themselves picked up. One of those is just overall team physicality in general. They weren't a very strong team. They did play one of the weaker schedules that I felt helped propel them into the playoffs. Granted, they had to earn some things, and they did have a very good first half of that playoff game against Milledgeville before the missiles turned it on the second half and routed them. But for Coach Jones and the Broncos to have some success this year, they're going to have to find some kids that are going to want to step up. And with the realignment and how things are, I mean, every game on their schedule is a divisional game. So they have opportunities, but they're going to have to find ways to make it happen. And I don't know if they have the depth necessarily this year to get through all of that.
Yeah. We've talked a lot about the importance of, that off-season workout plan and that, that regimen, having it set up and ready to go. And Coach Jones thinks that they've really improved a lot in their off-season workouts, that, kids have been dedicated to it. So that'll be interesting to follow along with, to see, if that can lead into some success. A few names to look at here. Paxton Bastian at quarterback is back. Bowden Gustafson at tight end. You have a pair of guards here, Aiden Myers, Mason Conroe. On the defensive side of the ball, Aiden Myers. You also have Gustafson, who I mentioned, Bastian at cornerback, Conroe at defensive end, and Caden Pfeiffer at cornerback as well. So, like I said, a handful of players returning. He mentioned area looking to improve his cornerback play. So on the defensive side of the ball, not giving up the plays in the passing game. So we'll see, what they can do, and if they can, make a move here in this Northern Division of the I8FA, I should say. So, all right, let's get into Milledgeville. Had a great season last year. They were 8-1 in the regular season. Head coach Jason Roble led this Milledgeville squad. They always seem to be in the mix. And when you start reading through, they lose Connor Nye, a huge name that did so much for them. It seemed like he was there forever, but for the amount of stuff he did, the accomplishments he had, he's gone. But there's a lot of names here, Mitch, that we recognize that made a lot of impact last year that should obviously make an impact again this year.
Yeah, no question. Two right off the bat, Micah Tom Smith and Spencer Nye. Those guys are going to be really dynamic on offense, and they anchor that linebacking core. But guys like Carter Livingood, Dalton Ademic, Connor Johnson, all these guys are going to be a huge part of this missile team. Like you said, they went 8-1 last year in the regular season. So yeah, you lose Connor Nye. That's a huge piece that you need to replace. But what they have coming back, I'm excited for this Milledgeville season.
Kyle, you said that was it Evan Shank who stepped in at quarterback a few times when Nye was out with some nagging injuries? What do you know about him, and what can he do to fill that void? And will they just be able to insert him and then rely on some of the athleticism around him to keep this offense moving?
Yeah, I think as far as running their offense, Evan will do a good job filling in. Obviously, he doesn't have the cannon that Connor Nye had, or necessarily the elusiveness in the pocket like Connor had. But when it comes down to being able to manage the game, being able to play within Coach Roble's system, which tends to want to play more of an up-speed game where you're both attacking the run and the quick pass, he's more than capable of running that offense and making those same reads and being able to do that. The only area of concern I could see potentially, like I say, he just doesn't have the firepower on the arm like Connor did. So the deep ball might not be something that we see on a regular basis like we did out of Nye the last 3 years. But overall, I think he'll give them a good opportunity, especially with speedsters and Micah Tom Smith and Connor Johnson back, and then Spencer Nye in the backfield there. I think that'll give him a good spot. And then Carter Livingood really stepped it up as the season went on late in the year too, and was able to make some big connections late in the season that really helped even more the Milledgeville offense to become more explosive. So I think Milledgeville is still going to be right there. They have some, again, like a lot of teams, like I said, they're going to have areas where they have players that are already there and areas to fill. But I think Milledgeville is going to be right back in the thick of things. They've been in the quarterfinals each of the last 3 years, and they're still trying to make that path to get past the quarterfinals. I thought last year was the year that they would finally break through, but unfortunately it didn't happen. Maybe this year's that year it does.
I think what's interesting is, it's names we recognize that are coming back, and you can say that about a lot of teams, but when you had Connor Nye that Milledgeville, you felt like relied on so much. But even saying that, it felt like every week there were some games that, that certain game was a Micah Tom Smith game where he had the breakout. And then there were some games where Connor Johnson had a huge breakout game. There were other games where it was Living Good doing that. So I think that when you look at their body of work last year, Connor Nye was kind of the consistent, right? You knew you were going to have a weapon in him, but there were guys stepping up, in spurts around him all year long. And I think that's a great sign moving forward, that all those guys are back. They're ready to take that next role and maybe be the leader. And, Schenk at quarterback, he doesn't have to be Connor Nye necessarily. And if he steps up and does that, that's even better for this Milledgeville team.
Yeah, absolutely. You're spot on in that. I mean, all you need is somebody that can continue to improve, win one game at a time, and then make the offense go. And as long as he's doing that, which I was at the game that he was there, because everybody's like, well, where's Connor at? Where's Connor at? And, he really stepped up and he played very good. And, he looked like he knew what he was doing. So that tells you that obviously he understood the offense. He was more than capable of running the offense. He felt comfortable in that position to run the offense. And those are all things that are huge. And me personally, they should help build that confidence going into this year too for them.
Yep. All right, well, let's keep moving our way through the division here. River Ridge last year under head coach Doug Nicholas was 5-4 on the season. They need to replace a lot of key players from graduation, but last year they returned to the playoffs for the first time since a semifinal run back in 19. So, Mitch, looking through the list here, who are some of the names we're looking at to kind of keep this River Ridge program in the playoff mix?
Yeah, one of the key guys and returning starters is Damon Dittmar. He'll be in that backfield on both sides of the ball as a running back and as a DB. But don't forget about Caden Bauer in that same sort of running back DB field. Hamish Bowden, Joseph Dubord, and Seth Reese, all players here for River Ridge that I think are poised to break out here for Coach Nicholas.
Kyle, what's the outlook here for River Ridge? What do you see in them, and what do you like about them?
Well, what I like about River Ridge is just the fact that Coach Nicholas has been there for quite a few years. He's done a great job as far as trying to bring the team up and make them more relevant. Obviously, this year they're going to want to gain some game experience, not having a lot of experience under their belt. Dittmar, like Mitch said, they're only big-time returning starter. So if they can have health on their side and gain that experience, obviously their number one goal is to be able to compete weekly and kind of see where that puts them as the year goes on. Looking at their schedule, you got a couple games there that are going to be tough right off the bat with Milledgeville, Polo. So there are, again, some opportunities for River Ridge to take advantage here and potentially see themselves into a good situation. But it's going to be tough, like Coach Nicholas said. I mean, he's got a lot of talent that he's got coming back that has zero to little experience, and they got to build on that. And if they can do that, I think you can see them having success to a degree. And by the end of the year, maybe they are that team that we're seeing getting in the middle to bottom half of the bracket for the playoffs. So, I'm not looking at them to go undefeated, but 4-5, 5-4 again isn't out of the outreach either. And maybe they can shake off a couple things and reach that 6-3 potential. But I think middle of the road right here with their schedule would be a good place for them to fit right in.
Well, they open the season. The Wildcats will open the season against newcomer to the 8-man ranks in West Carroll. West Carroll has a new head coach, Abelardo Ceseda. So obviously West Carroll has struggled. They were in 11-man football a year ago. They were 0-9. They had taken the year off the year before. So the program has been in flux, but Abelardo Ceseda takes over now. Kyle, what do we see in this program? And I mean, they have some experience transitioning to 8-man. What do you look at? What do you see that needs to happen here for them to, just get a few wins, just pick up some positive momentum?
Well, I'm going to start off with what Coach Seseda told me, and that's that they're looking to get their first win in a very long time. The last time they won a football game was back in 2019 when they were still an 11-man and last made the playoffs. So really his big expectations are to create a new identity. This shift to 8-man football should help them with that. They have a lot of returning players off of last season. So now it's just getting introduced to the 8-man game. If they can get an offense and a defense that is ready to play 8-man football, they might be able to see some success. They have some good experienced athletes coming back. They're not very big in size, so they're going to have to work on toughness, which is one of the things that Coach Seseda also mentioned. And they can't have that. They have to have a no-quit attitude where, when the going gets tough, you can't lay down. You just got to keep fighting it. Their goal this year is to be above 500. They want to try to at least win 5 games and get back to the postseason. I think that's a great outlook for them to be in. It's just, I don't know how well it's going to work for them, being that they're new to the 8-man game, because looking at their schedule, they're going up against a lot of teams that have experience with the 8-man game, both on concepts, running their game plans, and that's going to be a whole new thing. I mean, there are some differences when you go from 11-man to 8-man and being able to adapt and make the things happen. And sometimes you're learning on the fly in that aspect, and I think that's where West Carroll will be this year. But I am interested to see how they fit in with the 8-man rank, because I think that they can definitely make themselves into a player.
Mitch, give us some of the names here we should watch for.
Yeah, sure. So you've got some returning guys. That's a good. What do I want to say? It's a good thing to have. It's a good building block to have. Like Kyle said, this is going to be a transition year. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a bad thing. Maybe this is what's best for West Carroll's personnel. It's hard to say, especially with that first year. But they've got some guys coming back that'll help them do that. You got Connor Townsend. You got Noah White, Austin Behrens, Cole Harrell, Winter Harrington. You've got Adam Buckholz. So you've got guys coming back. You've got a handful of guys coming back. And again, it gives you at least that solid building block of players that are all going to be learning this new, call it system, call it style of play, together. And at least they've got that experience behind them to help push that forward.
Yeah, when you look at, Winter Harrington at quarterback, Connor Townsend at running back, Austin Behrens, tight end, defensive end, Cole Harrell at running back, like you mentioned, a lot of those in those skill positions. It'll be interesting to see how they can transition to the 8-man game, and if they can, find some success there after, getting knocked around in 11-man football last year. I don't know exactly what the numbers were for West Carroll a year ago. I'm guessing they weren't great, and I'm guessing that these players were playing a lot of minutes in a lot of football games, and some other teams were probably able to sub some guys in, and they weren't able to sub in probably as often. So I'm guessing, they took their lumps a year ago. Now if they go to 8-man, does that level the field a little bit for them? I am really curious to see how this season ends up for West Carroll.
Yeah, that's one of the things too. They were a very young team last year, and they're still a young team this year. I mean, out of all those returning players and upcoming newcomers, there's only 4 seniors in that group. The rest of them are still juniors and sophomores. So they definitely have room to build, room to grow. And it's going to be interesting. This is the right move for West Carroll to help them get their program back up to a standard that we saw was somewhat more consistent under the Matt Lightson era. And hopefully Coach Seseda can see a new success moving forward for the Thunder as they transition to 8-man football. I think, like I said, this is a great opportunity for West Carroll to reestablish what they want to do.
Yep. Last but certainly not least in our 8-man coverage here, the Polo Marcos. Head coach Ted Alston had a 7-2 regular season last year. They made it to the semifinals a year ago. And this team is no stranger to long playoff runs. They won back-to-back state championships, I believe. Kyle, correct me if I'm wrong, right? Back-to-back state titles?
Back-to-back state titles, 2019, 2021.
There you go. And so they've made it to the semifinals every year since joining 8-Man. So this is a team we're certainly very familiar with. And Mitch, this looks on paper with some of the names we're hearing here, a team that we're going to be talking about again.
Yeah, looking at these players, I'm excited for Polo's year. You got Noah Dewey, a name that we called out a lot last year as that kind of utility player on both sides of the ball. Jeffrey Donaldson, Logan Nelson being him and Donaldson being the big boys up front. You got Wyatt Plackno also on the defensive line. All those guys coming back, big names, poised for another great year to, like we just talked about, push Polo deep into the postseason. And build on the success that they had last year.
Kyle, what do you think about Polo this year?
Polo definitely has that success factor that follows them. And I mean, even last year, with Brock Soto, you knew that they were going to be good in that realm. But if you would have told me at the beginning of the year that they were going to make another semifinal run, I would have said, I don't know about that one, because they were really more of a one-man show to a degree.
And it was an incredible one-man show. I will say that.
Oh, it was. I mean, Fulton first off, he had one of the most prolific careers in 8-man football history. I mean, granted, it's not a long history, but still, the career numbers that he put up were just video game-like, and watching him play was it was fun. It was awesome. It was exciting and passionate. And, they have – some of these players to watch are guys that did get some playing time last year. So, they do have some experience there. It's how do you replace having a superstar and trying to find somebody else that can step in and fill those shoes? Because those are some huge shoes to fill when you're talking about one of the all-time career leaders, your school's career leader. Those aren't easy shoes to fill. We all know that, especially in small school football. It's even harder to fill that. But like I said, and like you guys have said too, Coach Alston has made a way of winning football games and deep playoff runs. And really, a lot of people refer to him as the godfather of Illinois 8-man football because of what he's been able to do in the 4 seasons that he's played it. Well, 5 seasons if you count the COVID year. And he's won a lot. I think we can count on one hand how many games he's lost. I think he's only lost 5 games.
There's not many. Yeah.
So, Polo's definitely going to be in the mix. And if you take a look at a lot of the coaches' response, at least on my half, a lot of the coaches expect the North to come down between Polo and Milledgeville once again, which makes that Battle of the Blacktop even a greater exciting game as we always expect it to be.
You nailed it. That's the rivalry, man. That is a great rivalry. I love that one. Yeah, I think Noah Dewey's the guy to look to. All conference wide receiver a year ago, 473 yards, 7 touchdowns, 7 2-point conversions. So he was there, getting the job done. Billy Lowry, can he step up? His numbers were there, last year. He had 200 yards. He had 100 more yards receiving. He had about 5-6 touchdowns. But his number is going to have to jump up. So there's an opportunity there. And in this system, in this Polo system, it's exciting to see who can be the next name, right? And I think that there's opportunities here for sure.
That's one of the things I love about Coach Alston. He's never shied away from staying with that power run game atmosphere. And he really established that when he came into 8-man. He's kind of kept that way. And like you said, Billy Lowry is one of the guys that I'm looking to step up and have a big role along with JT Stevenson. And I'm curious to see how Ziegler and Gulbranson help fill in those roles. And then who do they put at quarterback? That I don't know, but it'll be interesting to see what they do. And I'm sure Coach Alston will have the boys rolling when week 1 gets here.
Sounds good. Let's take a quick break. And then we'll jump into 11-man Northwest Upstate Illini football talk. We'll be right back. This episode of View from the West podcast is brought to you by Simulation Sports. In addition to golf simulators and batting cages, Simulation Sports provides golf club repair, custom fittings for driver shafts, and even private lessons for golf, baseball, and softball. Whether you're looking for a fun group activity or want to fine-tune your skills and equipment, Simulation Sports has something for everyone. Visit their facility at 400 South Main Street in Monmouth, Illinois, or go to thesimulationsports.com to start playing today.
Shouldn't financial advice focus on you? I can help you plan for your financial future, from protection to saving to retirement. I'm Nate Neighbor, your Modern Woodman representative. Call me at 309-233-2656 or find me on the Modern Woodman website.
Get to know your local Modern Woodman representative to plan for your financial future and learn about valuable member benefits. Modern Woodman of America. Touching lives, securing futures. Securities offered through MWA Financial Services, Inc., a wholly owned subsidiary of Modern Woodman of America.
View from the West podcast is also sponsored by the Cupcake Cartel. Gourmet cupcakes that are made to order. Over 40 flavors, including wedding cake, lemon blueberry, strawberry milkshake, snickerdoodle, and Oreo. Perfect for weddings, birthdays, showers, fundraisers, or any event. You can find the Cupcake Cartel on Facebook. We thank them for their support. Welcome back to the show. Before we jump in, Mitch, I think we better check the voicemails here. We got an important phone call that came in over the weekend.
Yeah, I didn't know we had a hotline, but yeah, we got an interesting call. So let's go ahead and play that for the listeners here.
Hey, this is Brett Bielma, the head coach of the Fighting Illini from Prophetstown, Illinois. You're listening to the View from the West podcast.
Man, how cool is that? The head coach of the Fighting Illini, Brett Bielma, from Prophetstown, Illinois, giving a shout out to View from the West podcast.
Yeah, we love it. We a lot of Illini fans listen to this podcast, and certainly a lot of local pride there from Coach Bielma. So yeah, we love the shout out and appreciate his support.
Kyle, you know that Brett Bielema keeps his eye on the Northwest Upstate Illini because he's seen your teams play in Champaign over the years. So.
Yeah, and actually, when he was in high school, he actually played against Forreston back when they made their run to the quarterfinals too. So he's got some experience up this way for sure, no doubt about it.
There you go. He's got to start recruiting some guys because Iowa's been doing it, so he's got to get in on the mix here.
That's one of the things I do like about him taking over is he has definitely made recruiting the state of Illinois one of his passions, and it's showing. It's starting to show.
Absolutely. I love it. Well, let's jump into the Northwest Upstate Illini 11-man football. Here we go. We're going to start with Dakota. Head coach Eric Diddish last year, 3-6 on the season. Returned some names, some familiar names, but 3-6 at this Dakota squad. They got some work to do in an always tough Northwest Upstate Illini. Mitch, who are some of the names here that we should be watching for?
Yeah, like you mentioned, some names that are returning that we called out last year, led by Braxton Niedermeyer, a tight end and a linebacker. Up front there for Dakota, Avery Bowers, Ethan Jacobs, Brody Good as the quarterback and a defensive back, Jaden Gordon in the backfield, and then the linebacker slot, Randy McPeak and Benny Gordon. So certainly a lot of returning guys here for Dakota to build upon that 3-6 year last year.
They returned a couple guys that will be 3-year starters. They got some replacing to do in some key positions. Kyle, what do you see out of this Dakota Indian squad?
Well, one of the things that has been a good positive is that Coach Diddish has been able to really help drive the weight room, and you're starting to see a lot of these guys really begin to develop and get stronger, and they're seeing that success and the outcomes that they're getting by getting in the weight room. And we talk about it all the time. The weight room is always a differentiator. When you look at the top teams in the state to the bottom teams in the state, you can just tell physically that those top teams are hitting the weight room on a more consistent basis. And that's where Dakota really needs to get back to doing. And Coach Diddish has been a key catalyst in helping to drive that. And some of these guys here are really making it show. One of the things with Dakota this year is they do have a lack of numbers right now. So they're trying to build that back up. And They're going to definitely need to learn on the fly because they got some guys that are going to have to work into some new positions that they weren't in just a season ago in order for the Indians to find some success here in 2024.
When you start, looking down their schedule a year ago, they win their first game at home against Fisher. And then, they have a streak of losses in there. They get a win over West Carroll, Galena, but it's a lot of those, what I call those like toss-up games, right? Where, they lose a close one to Stockton in week 8. They lose game 28-8 against Eastland Pearl City in week 9. Going back earlier in the season, Forreston in week 2, they lost 18-8. So there were opportunities there where Dakota was in some games, especially when you start talking about a Forreston team, in week 2 where they were close. They hung with them. So I think as we talk through the NUIC, I'm always fascinated by, the teams in the middle, right? Those teams fighting for that 5th win to get playoff eligible. Dakota's one of them. We'll talk about a few more later, but Mitch, what do you see here? I mean, it's tough, but how do you find that 4th, 5th win to get in there? Maybe even more, that 6th win.
Yeah, well, and when we're talking on NUIC this year, certainly you're going to have 8 conference games, and each team will play 1 out of conference game. And Dakota starts theirs out of conference in week 1, and it's a playoff. It's a returning playoff team in Dwight. So this road for Dakota to get back to that, 500-ish, 5-4 area, it's going to be pretty hard when you're. I mean, look at their schedule. Dwight, playoff team. Forreston, playoff team. Du-Pec, Du-Pec, playoff team. Lena-Winslow, playoff team. Fulton, playoff team. Morrison, playoff team. They don't play a team that didn't reach the playoffs until week 7. So it's a gauntlet. It's incredibly tough here for Dakota. Obviously, this season is a brand new season for all these teams, but just looking at it on paper, man, that is a tough 7-week, 6-week stretch for the Indians.
Kyle, talk about Coach Diddish, and what do you see in him and the way he leads the program that keeps you thinking that something's there, that this program could turn around? What does he do that you like?
Well, I mean, first off, it starts with the passion for the game. I mean, obviously, he played collegiately at NIU, so I mean, he's got that moxie about him. He's very passionate. He's not only coaching at Dakota, he lives in the district. He's married into a Dakota family. He's very well versed on the NUIC. He grew up outside the East Dubuque area, actually. Obviously went to school at Wahlert and Dubuque, but he knows a lot of the teams and has a lot of friends actually from around our age group that he grew up with that were in the NUIC at the same time that I played back in the day. So, what I see in him is he's very passionate about what he wants to do. He's very knowledgeable in how he wants to attack things, both off the field, in the field, in video room. And, he's doing everything that he can to really make this program better overall. And as long as he continues to get more buy-in, which, as these younger kids are coming up, he's definitely getting more of that buy-in. It's just he's got to just keep pushing it. And I know that he will. I know him at a personal level, and I know where his drive factor is, and he's going to make the things happen. And there's a lot of good things coming up for Dakota. It's just, can they continue to weather the storm and keep moving forward at the moment? Like you said, this is a tough schedule for Dakota. They know it's a tough schedule. And, again, you can only take it one game at a time. So anything can happen. We clearly have seen that over the last couple seasons with their games with Forreston. I mean, a team, when you look at Dakota and Forreston in recent years, you'd always say Forreston should beat Dakota hands down. And I mean, they've been some battles. They've been battles that you would not necessarily expect on paper. So, if you can start battling with one of those teams at the upper echelon of the conference, that starts to build that belief factor back into, hey, we can do this week in and week out.
Yep, absolutely. Well, they will start, as Mitch said, on the road at Dwight. They'll be on the road again against Forreston in week 2. They'll be at home, their first home game. They'll open up against Du-Pec. So we'll jump in and talk about Du-Pec. Head coach Tyler Hoffman had his team at 9-3 last year. They returned 6 on offense and 6 on defense. Mitch, again, a lot of names we're familiar with here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want to show my cards too quickly because maybe we'll do this at the end. But this is a team that I'm really, really excited about seeing this year. A lot of guys coming back. First and foremost is their gunslinger, Cooper Hoffman. Such a fantastic year last year. Led this Du-Pec team to a great season. Again, he's poised to do it once again with guys like Jackson Dietrich coming back as a wide receiver. You've got guys like Peyton Mulder up front, Nolan Stadler up there blocking for him. So, Jordan Gassman, Justin Anderson, these are a lot of guys that part of that 6 starters back on offense, 6 starters back on defense, a very balanced effort here coming back for Du-Pec. I'm really, really excited to watch these guys play this year.
They had 5 shutouts on defense a year ago. We talk a lot about Cooper Hoffman and a lot about what Du-Pec does on offense, but 5 shutouts a year ago. I think, man, it feels like every year we kind of ask about overall physicality. Kyle, what do you think about this year's Du-Pec team? Are they physical? Are they up front, strong enough to deal with a full game against Lena-Winslow or against Forreston?
Well, that's going to be tough. I mean, it's great to see that, what they have, like 50 guys make 80% of their weight room attendance and over the summer workouts. 40 were there 90% or more of the time. So Du-Pec's got the program set up right to where they're getting in the weight room. They're building that strength. They're building that camaraderie. They have a lot of that buy-in to the overall process to be a successful program. And I think that's why, since 2019, we've seen them be in the playoffs, second round, third round, consistently getting to that second round. Last year, they finally broke through to the quarterfinal before they had to meet up with Byron. But at the end of the day, the physicality up front is a little bit of a concern. I mean, if you take a look at one of his areas to improve, it's offensive line play. And unfortunately, the offensive line has really been the Achilles heel for the Rivermen over the past couple of years because they've had the running backs, they've had the quarterbacks, they've had the receivers, they've had the speed. They just have not been able to really sustain that offensive punch that a Lena-Winslow will bring to you on a consistent down after down after down basis. And that's really that was their demise against Byron. Byron was the exact same way. Pound, 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 pound. And Du-Pec couldn't answer to that.
Byron might have been the greatest of all time at that. So
well, you're not wrong there. I mean, that Byron team was an animal, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was a very great team.
Still is.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, let's not forget the fact that they had to come back. Well, they got a lead, and then I think they had to battle back against Montini. And Montini is normally a 5A team playing in the 3A playoffs. So, and they're going to have to go through. I mean, the road to 3A state is going to go through those two teams once again this year.
Yeah.
Until Montini finally gets the kick up when we head into 2025. But either way, yeah, Byron is just a load. But Du-Pec, they got to get that offensive line. If they can do that, like you said, they got the quarterback, Cooper Hoffman. I mean, just look at some of his career numbers here. 3,008 passing yards, 37 touchdowns, 1,165 rushing yards, 19 touchdowns. Total of 56 career offensive touchdowns. He is 1,895 offensive yards away from passing William Gustafson, the quarterback from Akron a few years ago, for the most collective yards from a QB position in conference history. If he can get 31 total offensive touchdowns. He would tie Will Gustafson's record for 87 offensive touchdowns accounted for by a quarterback, which is also an NUIC record. So he is well within striking distance of all these numbers. Then you look at the NUIC's all-time passing leader, which is Aiden Chang, also an Akron grad, threw for 5,736 yards and 71 touchdowns. Cooper needs 2,729 yards and 35 touchdowns through the year to surpass that. Some of that might be a little bit of a stretch, maybe so on the touchdown part, but that yard part could definitely be well within striking range, provided that the offensive line can give Cooper the ability to make the reads and get the throws downfield. Now, here's the thing with Cooper. Cooper's not Hunter. And I know Hunter's been gone for a couple years now. Cooper is more of a dynamic offensive threat at the quarterback position. He's not the pocket quarterback that his brother was. He is a guy that's going to get in the pocket. He's going to give you that 1-2 read. If it ain't there and he's got running room, he's taking off. And that's what makes him so versatile, much like Will Gustafson was when he was playing for Akron. So that's the exciting part of Cooper's game. And that's why I brought both these guys up in comparison to where he stands, because Cooper is definitely going to go down, injury provided, as one of the most prolific quarterbacks to come out of the NUIC.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Mitch, what we've seen over the last couple years, he's a dynamic athlete and he's a game changer. And you hope that, if he gets that support that we're looking at, this Du-Pec team, like you said, you kind of hinted towards it. You're expecting big things or thinking big things.
Yeah, I think when Kyle reads off those, what Hoffman has left, so to speak, to catch those records, I think probably more likely he'll have that total yardage record, just the way that they play. So I think that record is in serious jeopardy, and certainly so is the passing yardage and touchdowns. But looking at their schedule, the bulk is going to come at the end of the season, and I'm looking at a Week 6 game on the road at Lena-Winslow, where I think Du-Pec has undefeated going into that game, and as it has the past couple of years, could determine who wins the conference. So, that stretch there for Forreston in 6, 7, and 8 with Lena-Winslow, Fulton, and Forreston could see a lot of jostling within the conference standings, but I think it is that Week 6 matchup where both teams, when I'm looking at Lena's schedule, I'm not quite sure. I'm sure they will be. Yeah, I'm sure they will be too. And that could determine the conference right there in Week 6.
Yeah. Looking ahead farther in non-conference play, in Week 9, Du-Pec has a really interesting non-conference matchup on the road at Seneca. Was Seneca a quarterfinalist a year ago? I know they beat Rock Ridge in the second round, I believe.
Yeah, they were 11-0 and then lost. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's an interesting matchup. I know Seneca's got a few athletes back that I've heard about. So they're a good, 2A school. That's a really good non-conference matchup there that will have a lot of playoff implications come Week 9 for sure. But I think there'll be a lot to be sorted out in the NUIC before we get to Week 9.
And remember too, Du-Pec last year in Week 9 played against Althoff Catholic, so they're not immune to playing a tough out-of-conference opponent.
Yep.
In prep for that 3A playoff gauntlet.
Yeah, that's a great call. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So Du-Pec, certainly one of the teams to be watching out for as a potential conference champion, as somebody to watch for. Let's move to another team that I find really interesting this year, Eastland Pearl City. Head coach Jared McNutt, they were 3-6 a year ago, but they returned 9 on offense, 9 on defense. That's the most of any team in the Northwest Upstate Illini. Kyle, go through some of the names. Give me some, players to watch for here, because this team is someone I think that, they could make a step up this year.
Well, he's more towards the bottom of the list, and really, Coach McNutt should have put him at the top of the list, but I think he's just kind of hiding him a little bit. But that's Will Burchin. He's only a junior, but as a freshman, he led the entire conference on defense and tackles.
Wow.
Last year, he was the first team unanimous all-conference linebacker as a sophomore. He's going to return to that linebacker role. He had been a fullback. They're going to put him on the offensive line. With his size and speed, I mean, this guy looks like a full-grown man as a sophomore. And going into his junior year, I can only imagine it's even worse yet. But, I mean, he is a physical specimen. I can only imagine that they're going to utilize him as a guard. Why wouldn't you? I mean, if he were on my offensive line, that's exactly where I'd put him. They're a fullback, one of the two. And looking at what they got, offensive line guard would be a great place to put him. Backfield-wise, you got Draven Zier as a junior. You know, he ran for just over 450 yards last year, 9 touchdowns. But this kid is very explosive. I had the pleasure of coaching him a couple years ago in baseball in like 12U, and even there you could tell that this kid was going to be an athlete. There was just that he just had that raw talent with him, and he's definitely been hitting the weight room, and it shows. Jackson Kemple, the senior, is going to be another running back to watch out for. He was second team all-conference last year. He is the younger brother of the Kemple twins that were on the EPC team that made the 2A semifinal run that lost to GCMS in that great game in Lanark back in 2018. So obviously there's a little bit of that old EPC war coming out here. Zy Haverlin, related to Brighton Haverlin, who is also on that 2016 team, played on the 2014 state championship team as well. He's there at defensive end, tight end. Adam Awender is of Aquin lore. His older brother, Eric, is one of the all-time career rushing leaders in the NUIC. And then you got Peyton Spears at wide receiver DB. Peyton Spears, his mother is Sarah Spears. She was pitcher D1 level for DePaul back in her day too. So
this is why we bring Kyle onto the pod. This sort of deep dive info. I love it.
So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of talent in this EPC lineup that is going to quietly, and I say quietly because they are starting to gain some traction within the NUIC and people looking at them. I'm saying these guys, they may have been 3-6 last year, but watch out, there might be a player in this NUIC in 2024. And obviously they're right there. They got the guys there to do it.
Yeah, never an easy run through the Northwest Upstate Illini. They start on the road at Galena, then they're on the road at Du-Pec. They have home games back-to-back against Fulton and Forreston. And obviously we haven't even talked about Lena-Winslow and Morrison waiting for them down the way. So, you know, it's never easy, but Mitch, what do you see out of this Eastland Pearl City team? I think there's potential here.
It's, the most experienced team coming back. So I think they'll probably have the best single year improvement from last year. Looking at last year's records, I think they'll be much better than 3-6. I mean, they bring back everybody up front. And yeah, I think even playing in this conference where it's incredibly hard to make that jump, I think they're going to win some games that they might have not last year. And again, they'll be sitting right there knocking on the door for a playoff spot with what they have coming back. I think they can do it.
Yeah. Coach McNutt talks about, their emphasis being physical, starting fast. They can't be sluggish to start a game. He knows every single week is going to be a battle. They got to stay, it's kind of, some of it gets into, cliche, but it's very true. You got to stop the run in the Northwest Upstate Illini, and they want to focus on being two-dimensional on offense. So if they can do that stuff, he thinks that would help them improve drastically. So, things to watch for in Eastland Pearl City. Also, we got to talk about, they do the midnight practice the first night when full pads are allowed. Cool tradition they have out there. So they'll be in Pearl City the Friday night into Saturday morning at midnight when the first full pad practice is allowed. So really cool thing they do out there. So, all right, let's keep moving along. The Fulton Steamers, Pat Lower and the Steamers last year ended the year at 6-4. They lost in the first round of the playoffs to Morrison, a game that, Kyle, you and I were walking the sidelines for that one. And Fulton jumped out to a lead in that game. So, Fulton jumped out quick. obviously Morrison responded. Morrison was a great team that we'll talk about, but this Fulton squad is good, and they were good a year ago. They should be right there again this year. They returned 7 on offense, 6 on defense. Give me some of the names we should be looking for.
Obviously, it's going to start up front with Dom Kramer at QB. We talked about him last year being a multi-dimensional QB coming in. Threw for 1,119 yards, 16 touchdowns, another 258 on the ground. He was a first-team all-conference selection. This year, he's definitely going to have to be a little bit more accurate. There were some games where he definitely had to put the team on his back in some situations to help lift them, and I felt like he really displayed some leadership in that position last year. And being a senior this year, I can only imagine that leadership is going to grow even more. I mean, last year's team was good, but I felt like their leadership skills needed to be built upon. Dom really tried to do that, and I think he's really going to pick that up even more this year. Skylar Crooks returns in the backfield. Not one of their premier running backs, but he did carry the ball to the tune of 500 yards, 4 touchdowns, was a second-team all-conference selection. So he has some experience there. Jacob Housengate at tight end is going to be a big addition. I would expect him to definitely get well more receiving touches this year with the absence of Balin Damoff. And then you got Josiah Held on the offensive and defensive lines, and that kid was definitely a monster in that interior line position. They're going to need him to be that again this year for them to see some success up front. And like you said, if Fulton can be able to do those things with the starters that they return, a good amount there, 7 offense, 6 defense, they should definitely be in the thick of things. But you definitely lose a lot of value when you lose a guy like Balin Damoff. And then even another guy that really stuck out to me was Trevor Theismann in the defensive back and as a secondary receiver. So a couple guys there that you lost, but Fulton, like you said, they're going to be in the mix. It'll be interesting to see where they fall, how they land. I know Coach Lohr is probably looking middle of the road. That's kind of where he sees himself at every year, it seems. We hope to be 5-4.
Yeah.
So, you're right, though. That game against Morrison, man, I mean, it's funny because there's a lot of people that had never been to Morrison before, and now with them coming in conference, I've heard a lot of compliments about how Morrison puts on a great show for their football games. And, I mean, you guys already knew that going to Morrison quite a few times. But, man, what an experience, what an atmosphere.
You're saying, there were a lot of, Northwest Upstate Illini fans who are just, not just Fulton fans, but people coming in from around the conference to watch that game. You're right. I saw a few of them walking the sidelines and just seeing them in passing. And that's great. That's cool to know that they experienced that atmosphere kind of leading into what we have this year. And we'll talk about Morrison in a minute, but some strengths that Coach Lohr thinks they have this year, the experience. We talked a lot about the people coming back, but he says this has been the best year in the weight room. So, we talked about the importance of the weight room, and Coach Lohr really praises that. Strength coach Jared Wessels. Coach Lohr says that Wessels is a huge part of the program, making sure that everybody is ready to go through the physicality that football can be. He says they're not very big necessarily, but he does feel like they'll be strong and quick. Mitch, what do you see in this Fulton team?
I'm excited for this Fulton team to hit the field with what they have coming back, especially with the big fellas up front. Don Kramer, like we talked about. I think Fulton's going to be a contender. I really do. I think that they'll, looking at their schedule, let me see how it shakes out for them. They're getting 2 games, out of the 2 of their tougher games, week 1 and week 2. And if you remember last year, they had that slow start kind of in the same sort of setup before they made their run. I think they'll be better equipped this year to face Forreston at home or to go to Lena in that week 2 matchup. So Maybe drop one of those. I think they win one of them and then make a bit of a run. And it all leads to that week 9 matchup against Morrison, I think, I think both those teams will be playoff teams this year. Obviously, there's a little bit more to play for this year with the return of the wooden shoe. But more importantly, I think for both teams at that stage in week 9, it'll be about, jostling for position in the 1A playoff. But I think Fulton is really going to be on that upper tier. I don't know that they'll win the conference, but I think they're going to be sitting in that maybe runner-up, third place sort of tier.
Yep. They have an interesting non-conference matchup at home against Knoxville. They played Knoxville, I believe, on the road a year ago, and they got the win, correct? Fulton got the win on the road?
They crushed them.
Yeah.
You remember that?
Yeah, that's right.
Knoxville was undefeated or 7-1 or something, and Fulton blew doors off.
Yeah. But once we get through week 8, week 9, Fulton and Morrison, man, the wooden shoe is back. And Mitch, this is probably a historic wooden shoe matchup because Morrison got the most recent win, but Fulton holds the wooden shoe in their possession. They're the defending wooden shoe champion. So
for reasons, surpassing reason and understanding that playoff game didn't count for that.
You are so salty about that.
No, every matchup should count for that. I don't know why it never was, but it doesn't matter. Great to have it back.
Yeah.
No.
I can't
don't even try and reason.
I can't even try to defend it, and Mitch already jumps on.
Shout out Jeff Parsons. I'll give you a pass on it.
More importantly, you can buy a shirt where your allegiances lie. Where should the wooden shoe belong?
Right. If you and Kyle liked the atmosphere of the playoff, and you guys are right, a Morrison playoff game is a really, really fun experience. Week 9 under the lights at Fulton for the wooden shoe, that's going to be a game to see.
Yeah, that'll be awesome. You're right. You're absolutely right. So I should explain. We have 2 shirts available with the phrase "the wooden shoe belongs in Morrison," or a shirt that says "the wooden shoe belongs in Fulton" with a little wooden shoe design in the team colors. So
I will wear a Fulton shirt if they let me ride in the Steamer golf cart.
I love it. I think we could talk to Parsons and see if we can.
That's
make that
the challenge
happen.
I'm throwing out right now. So I will wear a Fulton shirt if I can ride in the Steamer.
Well, you can head out right now and buy that shirt from the Breedlove's store that's online, available right now through the end of the month before the season gets started. Like I said, the wooden shoe belongs in Morrison, or the wooden shoe belongs in Fulton. We'll get to Morrison in a minute here, but that's your breakdown on Fulton. All right. Oh, one more thing we have to talk about before we move along from Fulton. So they play an annual game of Family Feud the Saturday before their first game. So it's a big pizza party. They put stickers on helmets. And Mitch, you'd love to be a part of that, right? Getting the perfection of the sticker on the helmet. I know you're a stickler for the details. You'd love that part of it.
No. I'll be the Steve Harvey of the night.
Okay.
But
No. The Steve Harvey role is already taken by Coach Lower. That's what I was going to get to.
Then I'm busy. No, I'm not putting stickers on Fulton helmets. No.
We really need to see Coach Lower playing the role of Steve Harvey. That's what I need to see. I mean, several years ago, they did a wrestling event where he played like Hulk Hogan, which I also was amazing.
That I could get down with.
Yeah.
Shout out to SummerSlam tomorrow.
There you go. All right, let's keep moving along.
Just a plug for all you Peacock subscribers.
Absolutely, I love it. I am one of those, so I love it. Let's move into the Forreston Cardinals. Head coach Keenan Janicki was 8-3 a year ago. They lost to Lena-Winslow in round 2. They returned 6 on offense, 6 on defense. If there's ever a program that is, reload year after year and get the job done within the system, this Forreston Cardinals team always has new names stepping up. Kyle, what's the names we need to know? Who are the names we need to know this season?
Right off the bat, Dane Setterstrom and Evan Bettner are going to be the two guys in the backfield that can really make a difference for this Cardinal squad. We all know that Forreston loves the double wing offense. Those two guys, not only are they both fullback, hard running style players, they're also linebackers on the other side of the ball. So with that said, you're going to look at Forreston being a little bit more physical power run team than what we've seen the last 2 years. I mean, we're talking about going back to like that 2018 style, I think, where you just got that big running back like Garrett Bodicher was back then, just steamrolling through you. So I think Setterstrom and Bettner can definitely provide that for them. Cohen Kirchner got some carries last year. Carson Akins wasn't readily available at the running back position, played mostly defense last year for him. I think if they can get him into one of those other running back roles as well more consistently, you provide both power and speed in this backfield, something that they kind of struggled with last year. So I think that'll be huge. Alex Schoenhoven, he's definitely growing up since last year. I mean, he's gotten a lot bigger. Same with Devin Bratt. I think those two guys will definitely play some key roles on the line play for the Cardinals, something that they're definitely going to need to do. That Forreston offense is predicated through that offensive line, and likewise defense starts through their defensive line, and they're going to need those two guys to really step up, and then they're going to need to have some other guys fill in some shoes in order for them to get that offense going. And then, of course, Brady Gill at quarterback. Last year, he was an undersized quarterback, didn't really have much of a strong arm, starting to get a little bit bigger. Hopefully with that will come the maturity and more strength, which should help in the passing game. And that was one of their downfalls. When their run game got shut down, they didn't have an effective ability to pass the ball. So hopefully this year they'll be able to do that with him coming back. He'll be a junior, so he's still young, a lot of room to grow. But they need to be able to have that option available, because you get up against a Lena-Winslow, and you know that at some point your run game is going to get shut down. So you have to have that ability to throw the ball. So I think if Forreston can put all of that together, we'll continue to see them be where we normally see them at. But like Coach Janik, he said last year when they were 7-0, he was the worst 7-0 team in the state, and everybody knew it. So they don't want to be in that realm. And his goal is like it is every year. Let's do the best we can week to week and compete for a state championship at the end of the year. So that's where their goals remain at. And that's what I love about Keenan.
Yeah. I mean, the goals remain the same year in and year out, right? He says in his preview form here, the goal is to control the clock, take care of the football, minimal mistakes, minimal turnovers. I mean, tell me that doesn't sound exactly like a Forreston program. And Mitch, that's what you love about these type of teams, this Forreston program.
You're right, but what I'm looking at is Coach put that they need to be less predictable offensively, and I don't know. I don't know if we need to be doing that. Let's just tell me what you're going to do and see if you can stop it, sort of mindset. So, yeah, I'm with Kyle. They're going to be up there. They're going to be right up competing for that for that conference championship. They're going to be right there. They're going to be a playoff team. I have no doubt about that. Looking at their schedule, it looks like they might have a favorable record again this year through those first 6 weeks. They go on the road for their out-of-conference game to Southwestern in Hazel Green, Wisconsin. So we don't know much about them. But then they're week 8 and week 9, Du-Pec and Lena. We've talked a lot with some teams here as we get later in the year. Those games are maybe not going to be about getting into the playoffs, but they're going to be about jostling for position in that playoff. And it could be, it could come down to who's going to be the conference champion this year.
Kyle, is that Southwestern team in the non-conference? That's the East Dubuque Co-op, correct?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
And they had some success last couple of years.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, I think because Joe Edler is the head coach there,
Yep.
and I'm pretty yeah, they did. They made the playoffs, and I can't remember how far they went.
Okay.
Second round or finals, I believe, is where they went last year. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's good to get them back in the mix, playing a non-conference game here, back in the traditional NUIC for football. But Forreston also does the midnight practice, similar to, we referenced EPC doing it. They do a midnight practice with the dads. Then they do a varsity moms brunch, and the moms help put the decals on the helmets. Probably a good idea. The attention to detail, in the moms there. I love it. The View from the West Player of the Week is brought to you by Breedlove Sporting Goods, Western Illinois' premier sporting goods store for uniforms, apparel, equipment, awards, and online team stores. They offer name brands such as Adidas, Under Armour, and Nike, and are extremely responsive with any inquiries. With a primary focus on the western side of the state of Illinois, Breedlove Sporting Goods is the fastest way to outfit your team. You can check them out on Facebook or at breedlovesports.com, or shoot Cal Breedlove an email at calbreedlove@gmail.com.
This is Dan Pearson of Fellowship of Christian Athletes. Our FCA team of staff, board, and volunteers is pleased to support View from the West with Greg and Mitch. Our Northwest Illinois FCA team is 3 teams in 1, serving coaches and athletes in the Three Rivers, Northern Illinois, and Greater Peoria areas, all with schools covered by View from the West. For more information, email me at danpearson@fca.org. FCA, the heart and soul in sports.
The Quad City's first and only fantasy football show, For Fantasy's Sake, has you all covered when it comes to all of your fantasy football needs. The guys come to you live every Sunday morning during the football season from 10 to 11:30. They've got the best analysis, rankings, DFS, and gambling advice between the Rock and Mississippi Rivers. So tune in to For Fantasy's Sake every Sunday during the football season from 10 to 11:30 a.m. on Facebook and YouTube.
All right, so 4 teams left here to cover in the Northwest Upstate Illini. We head to Galena. Head coach Ed Freed and the Pirates were 3-6 a year ago. Kyle, what do you see from the Pirates? What do they got coming back? And, can they be one of those teams that we talked about fighting for that 5-6 wins instead of the 3-win mark?
Yeah, I think that we can see Galena continue to be competitive. I mean, obviously, being at 3-6, their record really didn't show that, right? But you take a look at some of their games, they were a team that did beat EPC in a big week 1 win. They won their week 2 game, so they got off to a great 2-0 start, but then proceeded to lose the next 6 in a row before finally upending Stockton. And you take a look at some of those games. I mean, they lost 20-0 in Dakota, a game that could have went either way there, like we talked about when we were previewing Dakota. You had the game against Fulton where they were in that one. The game against Saranac, Michigan, they were in. They were actually tight with Forreston for a long period of time before Forreston finally broke through in the fourth quarter to open up that game. So there again, another team that was 3-6 with at least 3 to 4 missed opportunities that kept them out of the playoff opportunity. So, with that, they do, like you said, they do have some experience returning. What I do like about them is up front, you got Will Anderson there. Josh McNett at tight end, and defensive line is back. So those guys are definitely going to be some critical players up on the front line. But then you still have Roman Romer and Miles Schumacher back. And then it's kind of, where do you put Owen Hafel and Zach Heller? Hafel's got a heck of an arm, could be a potential quarterback. Romer's a natural quarterback who's been playing running back. So it'll be interesting to see what they do there. I think Romer will be the quarterback. Hafel will stick at that wide receiver position. But I think Galena can continue to build on what they've done. It's just, it's going to be interesting to see how it all matches up. Again, they're going to have a pretty tough schedule in front of them, like a lot of these teams do, and we continue to talk about it. But, probably one of the easiest games they're going to have on their schedule very well could be that Fenimore, Wisconsin game there in week 4. So
I'll be honest. I don't know much about them. So,
Yeah, I haven't heard nothing about them. I think they were like 2-7 last year or 3-6 also. And from what I know about them, they don't play in the same type of conference that we do, so it's a little bit inferior to what we're used to. But with that respect, if I'm Galena, you got to go in there and you got to go in with the respect to the team because you don't know what to expect. And it's a game that you're going to have to win in order to make the playoffs, especially looking at how their schedule breaks out here.
Yep. Well, let's move along to the team that carries the headlines in the Northwest Upstate Illini. Lena-Winslow, the Panthers head coach Rick Aaron, led the Panthers to a 13-1 season. They lost in the state championship game to Camp Point Central a year ago. But again, a lot of names coming back for this program. This is a program that, they reload. They bring talent in every year. We find new names that we're talking about. And some of the names here are names of guys that I think are going to have a lot of success on the field. Mitch, you got to like something, the stuff you see here.
Well, there's another dunker. So what's there not to like about that? But before getting into that, just looking back at Lena's year last year, right? Kind of uncharted territory in those final 2 weeks, in the semifinal and in the state championship. In the semifinal, they played Chicago Hope, which was a very, very good team. It was a team that had a style of play that we don't see a whole lot of. I do not remember that quarterback's name, something Jenkins Jr.
Yep.
A dynamic dual threat guy who, for as good as Cooper Hoffman is, Jenkins presented a completely different sort of dynamic and play. And you saw Lena-Winslow be put in a spot where they hadn't been in before, where they had to fight. And I'm not saying they haven't had close games before, but I mean, it looked pretty dire for a while in that game. Certainly at halftime, it didn't look good. And they had to fight and claw and get that late win. And then you get to the state championship game, which was familiar territory for Lena-Winslow, obviously. But we had said all along in the past years' previews, either about the season or about the state championship, that we weren't going to predict Lena was going to lose unless they played a team that beat them at their own game. And that is, to a T, what Camp Point Central has built over a long period of time, and that's exactly what they did to them. And so coming into this year, how do they respond from that? They've got some guys coming back. They are reloaded. There's no question about that they're going to be a 1A power. I have no doubt about that. But what did they learn from those 2 weeks, right? What did they learn about themselves in those 2 weeks? So obviously, Rick Aaron and that coaching staff that's been there for so long are going to have these boys ready. But I'm looking forward to seeing how Lena-Winslow responds to losing that state championship game. And again, knowing that there's a team out there on the south side of the state who is probably going to be the favorite again this year, can they get back to matching up with them again? But again, we mentioned Dunker, Gannon Dunker are going to be on the line. Coburn Lynch, we talked about him a lot last year. Alex Schlichting, I think he's their lightning back. Luke Kemple, on both the offensive and defensive line. This is a team that brings back 6 starters on defense, and I think that's really what is going to anchor this team, right? Experienced defense. We know what they're going to do on offense. Although I got a question for Kyle in that regard, but we know what they can do on offense. And so if that defense can play the way it has for the last, decade, they're going to be doing the same thing to the same opponents again this year. So as much as some players that they've lost, we'll see some new names this year, but I think it's going to be business as usual for Lena-Winslow.
Well, Kyle, I'll ask you then, what do you think in those last 2 weeks? What do you think that Lena-Winslow learned, or, what did they see that maybe they can build upon? Because it was a pretty interesting 2-week stretch between the contrasted styles, but also two teams that were executing at a very high level. And Lena-Winslow was able to answer the call in the semifinals, and in the state championship, they fell short against a team that was executing at a high level in a different way, kind of matching them, blow for blow in the way they do it. What do you think about those last 2 weeks?
So when I take a look at those 2 weeks, obviously I had the ability to be at both of those games. Going into Chicago Hope, I think it was twofold. I think that Lena-Winslow felt that they could go into that game and it was going to be a runaway because of Hope's prior lack of success against NUIC power teams. And what happened is they came up against Eddie Jenkins Jr., who had a dynamite arm, some speed receivers that they really had no business matching up with speed-wise. I mean, they didn't have anybody really fast enough that could match up with them. And then Hope had an offensive line that was big enough to – they weren't physical, but they were just big enough to physically wear down the pass rush. And likewise, on the defensive side of the ball, they were able to have an entire different set of linemen come in there that were more fresh, that were able to do the same thing. And I mean, if you look at their offensive defense, I mean, it was almost like they had two different teams. And that bode well for them, especially with the size that they had, because it kept them fresher longer. And they were able to really wear Lena-Winslow down. And what I really felt hurt Lee-Win last year was the lack of a passing attack. And again, it's kind of like how we've seen Forreston in recent years where they can run, but then you get them in a passing game and they can't really pass that well. That was kind of what Lena-Winslow's demise was last year. I mean, they were able to sustain it for 13 games and go 13-0 before losing that state championship game, that incredible rematch with Camp Point Central. But against Hope, they just – I think they came in too confident, thinking that they were going to win. Granted, they were able to get some key passes in that game that threw Hope off that really – saved the season, because if they would have just stuck with Dunker that got them there, they would not have been back at the state championship game. You move into that state championship game with Camp Point Central, and on paper, you should say, man, Lena-Winslow won this game 30-0 last year, or 30-8, sorry. They should be able to do the same thing this year. Because size-wise, the advantage was grotesquely in favor of Lena-Winslow. But that's where Coach Dixon and his team and his squad and how he runs his squad to be fast in all facets of every game. Not saying that Lena-Winslow doesn't. They do. They try to do the exact same things that Camp Point Central does. They run all the speed stuff. The only difference is you don't see Lena-Winslow posting about it like you see Camp Point Central and Moreau, Forsyth, and some of these other schools doing. They keep it more inside circle. They don't give out a lot of information, as you can see by the low results that you get responses from Coach Aaron. But with that, the speed of Camp Point Central took advantage of what Lena-Winslow was. I mean, that first offensive series, we watched Lena-Winslow put a stop to Camp Point Central, and then they were able to drive the field, but they couldn't convert. And to me, that was the difference maker in the game. And then once Genenbacher was able to break off that run to put the first points on the board, it was almost like Lena-Winslow went into desperation mode. They never tried to do anything that they did against Hope. They did not throw the ball at all. They continued to try to run the ball. They did move the ball. They were able to get it across into Camp Point Central territory multiple times. They just could not generate it deep enough. They didn't have a kicking game. And when you don't have a kicking game, you don't have a passing game, and all you're doing is relying on the run, and you're going up against a smaller but faster team that can attack your attack points faster than you can, that's a recipe for disaster. And that's where Camp Point Central won the game, in my opinion.
Yeah, that Camp Point Central team was executing that day and that whole state tournament run really on such a high level that, credit to them, credit to Coach Dixon, the way he had his players prepared for not just that game, but that entire state tournament run. We talked a lot about last year, the game against Althoff and what they were able to pull off there with the athletes that Althoff had on the field, and they'll probably have them back again this year too. What they were able to do in that game was remarkable. And, and especially what they were able to do in a state championship game to get that championship run. But getting back to Lena-Winslow, I think that they're still going to be right there because, again, similar to Coach Dixon, we've talked about how similar these programs are. Coach Aaron will have this program executing at a high level when it comes to this conference that's so tough. We've talked about the gauntlet that it is, and Lena-Winslow usually ends up on the favorable end going through this gauntlet of teams. Will this team look the exact same? I don't know, but I know that insert player here, player there, they're going to be ready to make the plays. I never worry about that. Mitch, what do you see in this Lena-Winslow team this season?
Oh, this is my question for Kyle, because one of Coach's comments was that they needed to fill a key hole at quarterback. But like you said, over the past couple of years, it's kind of been stick whoever we have in there. It's been kind of their MO just to run the ball or make very few passes. But Kyle, I feel like we might have talked about this before. The rumor mill was that Lena's got a young quarterback who can throw it. I don't know if he's in the mix to be starting this year or what that looks like.
That's a great question. So, I mean, obviously you look at Jalen Rakowska, he had been a quarterback in past years. They're probably going to shift him to a running back. And Cash Lessman, who was a sophomore last year, so he's an incoming junior, will take over that quarterback role. And with that, he does have the capabilities of throwing the ball downfield. Should help them open up that offense a little bit more and then provide them the opportunities to continue to do what they do. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Lena-Winslow, like Forreston, they're not going to go away from what they do and what they know. But when you can add a few different keys to your high-octane type offense that can throw a defense off. I mean, I just look back a couple of years ago when they had Ravion Valentine there. They would swing him out on a backside, basically a fly route on a swing pattern, but then he would shoot right up the hash marks, and everybody's looking at double dive going one way, and Ravion's going out the backside the other way, and he's wide open every time. And the quarterback that they had that year, gosh, I remember his name, but I can't think of it at the moment. Anyway, he was a converted tight end. And, that's one of the things that Coach Aaron has done. He's always found somebody, like you said, Mitch, to be that plug and play style QB. Don't get me wrong. Jake Schumacher did a great job of running the offense last year. Unfortunately, he just did not have the high-level capability to throw the ball deep. Was great on the intermediate routes, but for whatever reason, they just did not try to attempt it against CPC. And I have to think that it was simply because of the team speed of CPC. They just felt like they could not make that happen in that game. But I think with Lessman there this year, you're going to see them have more success with that.
I think obviously it goes without saying, Lena-Winslow is going to be one of the teams we're talking about week in and week out. They're going to be in the mix. Mitch, you kind of alluded to it. Maybe we'll get to our predictions in a minute here, but Lena-Winslow has made the state finals 4 years in a row. They won it 3 years in a row. 5 out of the last 6 seasons they've been there. What's interesting is maybe my favorite game of the season. They open on the road at NUIC newcomer Morrison. Mitch, you've waited long enough. Are we talking about the Morrison Mustangs now in the Northwest Upstate Illini?
It still feels a little surreal. To be included in not only the best conference in Illinois, but just again, you're shifted from a long history of Big Rivers, of Three Rivers, but you gain back that rivalry with Fulton. You gain back some teams that they've played in the playoffs over the years. So it's a natural fit for sure. So if the tides are turning, this is a great fit for Morrison. So yeah, we're talking Lena-Winslow. Well, they're opening on the road, like you said, against Morrison. So Nate Vandermeide in his second year is going to get a taste of the NUIC right away.
So the Mustangs a year ago, 9-2. They won in the first round against Fulton, which we talked about. They lost in round 2 to Anawan Wethersfield. That was a fantastic game. That came down to the wire. Two great teams. I believe it was at Wethersfield, correct? Yeah.
Yep.
Great game. Looked like a great atmosphere there. So for Morrison, obviously a ton of talent, a ton of speed on the field a year ago. They returned 4 on offense, 4 on defense. But the names to watch for: Brady Anderson is back. He was the speedster a year ago, over 1,000 yards, 19 total touchdowns. They have Colton Bielema at quarterback, 844 yards passing, 12 touchdowns. So this was a Morrison offense that was known for the speed, but they could go to the air and they could find guys in space. Bielema could find guys in space and get guys the ball who were able to then, outrun the defense. You also have Austin Boonstra on offense and defensive line. Who was Mitch? Alvarado was a name that I saw at the end of games a year ago or in spot duty. He was really fast, and Vandermeide didn't mention him here, but he's got to be a guy that we're going to name.
Yeah, I imagine he'll be the Robin to Anderson's Batman. I think he was a freshman last year.
Okay.
I think he's an underclassman, but yeah, he'll be right there, no question about that. So, talking about Colton Bielema, he doesn't have Chase Newman to throw it to, doesn't have Carson Strading to throw it to. So in the run game, it's going to be the Brady Anderson show. I mean, he put over 1,000 yards last year, 19 touchdowns as part of a stable of running backs. What can he do now that he's more the lead back? Can he be relied on? I think so. There's no question about that. Look what he did on the track this year. But Coach Vandermeide said he wants to be able to be versatile. So maybe not rely so much on Anderson or be predictable that he's going to get the ball every time. You've got Colton Bielema, you can throw it, but you do have to find some pieces to throw too. So it'll be interesting to see what this Morrison team looks like, I think. Even if they were still in the track, I think they would have an interesting lineup. Add in the caveat that now they're playing in the NUIC week in and week out against some of the best teams in the state. This is an intriguing addition to this conference, and we'll see how Morrison adjusts.
So Kyle, as the newcomer here in the Northwest Upstate Illini, you've covered teams in this area for a long time. You've been familiar with Morrison, and now they're right in your wheelhouse. Now they're in the conference. What do you see from them this season?
Yeah, I mean, you guys have done a good job of really explaining it. I mean, when you have a guy with the speed of Brady Anderson coming back, I mean, he's definitely a guy that I'm looking for. And I'm excited to see Morrison in the conference, obviously. Rylan Alvarado, by the way, is an incoming sophomore.
Thank you. Yes.
Didn't I say that?
I don't.
Didn't I say that?
I don't think you said his name.
You said he was.
I thought I did. Okay, that's all right. That's my bad. That's my.
But you're all right. You're all right, man. I do like the fact that Boonstra comes back. That definitely helps provide some experience. Tyler Peters is going to bring some experience back for these guys. So will Colin Rankus. And then, like you said, having Bielema back at quarterback is going to be huge. But they do still have, I mean, while it's great to have speed and speed kills, and, they boast, the 4x100 team that wins state every year or something like that. Anyway, they're really.
They won the 4x1, the 4x2, and the 4x4 at state.
Okay. There you go. I knew they were fast. How about that? But what they do lose is a nice physical fullback like Soft Strading because of graduation. So who's going to be the guy that's going to step into that position? I think for their offense to have success against some of these powers, like Coach Vandermeide listed, when you look at the NUIC, while he may not be keen on who the returning players are for each of the teams, he knows that Lena-Winslow, Forreston, and Du-Pec are the three teams that are constantly battling at the top of the conference. He knows that the conference is going to have to run through those three schools. So with that, he has a little bit of a dynamic offense. He wants to run the ball, but he has the capabilities of throwing the ball. But you do lose some key playmakers with Chase Newman gone, Deshaun McQueen gone, Sauce Strading's gone. So he does. He's got some holes to fill. But what I honestly feel with Morrison coming into the conference, I think that their first year in the NUIC, they automatically put their name into that championship echelon atmosphere, to where I feel that first game of the year, that could be your conference championship game, or at least a precursor to who could be your conference champion. I do believe that Du-Pec still very much in that role. But when it comes to overall physicality, being able to watch Morrison play last year, and then the team B that they do have, they're going to fit very well with Lena-Winslow, Forreston, and Du-Pec as far as just jumping right in and getting to the top of the conference in year one of the NUIC.
Yeah, crazy to think. Yes, a lot could be determined in week one in this Northwest Upstate Illini. We've talked for many years about Lena-Winslow and Forreston in week 9, and that's always been a battle, and that's always determined a lot. This year, it could be week 1 that determines a lot. And again, all due respect to Du-Pec, Forreston, Fulton, who are all going to be competing in there too. Mitch, what do you got?
One of my favorite caveats here, maybe my favorite one, is that my dear friend for a long time, Austin Rickles, the speed coach for this Lena-Winslow football team, the head track coach, makes his long-awaited return to the Morrison sidelines as a coach. He's been there for track. They have not played in football since he's been a coach there. So I can say for certainty there's going to be a lot of excitement in that household in week 1.
Man, that's crazy. Yeah, that's got to be an emotional return home, right? I mean, for as invested as he is in Lena-Winslow,
it'll be fine. Like I said, he's excited. They thought that there was a chance, had Morrison beat and on Weathersfield, that would have happened in the playoff game.
Yeah.
So this has been long awaited for Coach Rickles there. So I'm excited for him to get back on those Morrison sidelines. Albeit the other side, but back in EM Budco Field for sure.
Yeah, he'll be standing over by himself, by his lonesome with no fans over there, and that Morrison setup, he'll be all by himself over there.
Yeah, it'll be a different view, a different perspective on that sideline. So yeah, it'll be. I'm excited for him. I'm excited for either of you guys if you're going to that week 1 matchup, because like you've said, this game has a lot of intrigue, and it could have a higher what do I want to say? Implications for the year in week 1.
I will say that I love the setup at Morrison, and no disrespect to the home crowd, but I love the feel of Kyle. We walked the sidelines on the visitors sideline last year. It's a cool feel looking towards the home bleachers. And especially for me getting video, you get that full big feel video of all the fans behind the players. It is a really cool look. So no disrespect to the home fans, but I do like walking the visitor sideline over there. So
it was fun. I mean, we were able to talk to head baseball coach Sean Swaim. He came up, introduced himself to us. So, Coach Swaim, if you're listening, I'd like to get you on our baseball schedule for the upcoming spring as well. So give me a shout out for that.
There you go. All right. One more team to get to here, then we'll wrap this up. The Stockton Blackhawks head coach Sean Downey was 4-5 a year ago. They lost by 3 to Galena in week 9, which forced them out of the playoffs. So just missed a playoff spot. They returned 6 on offense, 7 on defense. Kyle, is this a team like we've talked about with like Eastland Pearl City? And, here you go. Stockton just missed the playoffs a year ago, but they returned some numbers here. What do they got? Can this be a year they push back into the playoff picture?
Again, I'm going to put them in the same boat with Dakota, EPC, and Galena. They're definitely a team that is able to compete in every game that they play. That's one of their expectations to do, and they showed that for the majority of the season last year, really. Obviously, they came up short, but in the same token, you take a look at a few of those games that they had, a close loss to Du-Pec in week 1, and a game that, if I remember correctly, they were winning that game. They had a close loss to Forreston in week 6. They did squeak out that one with Dakota in week 8, and then they lost that close one with Galena in week 9. And 4 and 5, they win that week 9 game. They're in the playoffs right there. And then if they stay in control of that Du-Pec game in week 1, I mean, we're talking about a team that could have been 6-3. And again, I mean, just like the other 3 schools I just mentioned, I mean, they were in that dogfight of being right in the battle and in the middle of the fight, but just couldn't come out on top. Taking a look at this year, they're only going to have 3 seniors. So really a lot of their success is going to depend on how fast their juniors and sophomores can adjust to playing varsity football and then grow in the physicality role. I think the upside to this group is that they're young, but they were in every game last year for the most part, at least in the first half of every game. So they have that fight in them. And when you have that fight, good things can happen. And I think that's what we can see out of Stockton this year. I think we're going to see some speed. It's going to come down to, can they get the offensive line in place and get them moving? If they can do that, I think you're going to see them have some success, but they need that to happen, and they need it to happen relatively quick this year for it to come to fruition.
Yeah, a few players to watch for them. Noah Larson as a quarterback, Eli Larson at tight end. You have Mark Detweiler, a fullback and a linebacker, first team all conference as a sophomore. On the line, you have Jeremiah Luke and Bryce Grube. So, a couple other guys, Jake Menzendijk and Carter Blair on the defensive side of the ball. Sorry, I hadn't read that name before I actually, read it out loud. So I got through it though. But Mitch, what do you see out of this Stockton team?
You see 3 dudes. And what I mean by that is I see Eli Larson, Oliver McPeak, Jeremiah Luke, who are premier wrestlers. And so that you're certainly going to have some pretty good strength here on this Stockton team. Looking at their schedule, and not to be predictive and not knowing anything about Shullsburg in week 2, I think they have 4 wins. And so I think they need to find one. Just looking at their schedule, and again, not that we predict a whole lot of week-to-week records and things. I think they will need to have an upset win somewhere to get to that 5th win this year. Where that comes, I'm not quite sure. We'll see how they look in week 1 at home against Du-Pec. Again, that Shullsburg game, which we don't know anything about, but then they got Lena and Fulton. So it's a pretty hard first 4 weeks. So can you get 3 wins in those final 5 weeks? I think that'll be the key for Stockton to get back into that playoff.
It's, we talk about those X factor games, the more these season previews roll along, we'll reference that for a lot of teams, right? These teams that a year ago were sitting at that 3-4 wins. Where are the games they need to pick up to move into that playoff picture? Kyle, we've talked a lot about it, that this Stockton group and a couple other teams here are right in that mix. It'll be interesting to see, some of those X factor games and where they fall.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, no offense to West Carroll, but you take them out and you throw Morrison in, you got a conference right here where every team had 3 wins, and every one of them, even the ones that missed the playoffs, had opportunities to convert losses into wins to be in the playoffs. So that just tells you that, Lena-Winslow dominated the conference. And outside of Coach Aaron, every coach has picked Lena-Winslow to win the conference. And my favorite quote was, "It's Lena's conference until somebody decides to beat them." So, But I mean, it's true, right? They are the dominant factor of this conference right now. And if you set them aside, teams 2 through 8 are all there. There's just a lot more parity there. And even this year, I mean, I while Lena-Winslow to me is still the echelon that you have to be at in order to win the NUIC, I still feel that they're going to be just a tad bit down this year compared to where we're used to seeing them. You know, they don't have that superstar talent coming through right now, but they have the discipline, they have the work ethic, they have the program because they've had it embedded into them since they were little kids, and they grew up watching that 16 team reach the quarters, the 17 team win in state, the 18 team blowing away an opportunity for a state title, the 19 team and that pure domination. Like, they grew up watching those guys and waiting for their chance, and they're there, and the program's there. So they're bought into the program. And when you have that type of program, like you said, it doesn't matter necessarily what your talent is. It matters what your fight level is and your commitment to making your development better. And that's where Lena-Winslow really separates themselves from everybody else right now. But like you said, with this year, it's going to be so cool to see. You got a lot of teams that are playing their non-conference games against the Six Rivers team just across the border on top of it. So that adds even a little bit more of a cool mix of who's better in the area, because you got that southwest corner of Wisconsin, especially with like Black Hawk, Warren, that, and even Hazel Green, Northwestern or Southwestern back in the day. It's really not back in the day. It's not too long ago. They were a very successful football program themselves. Shalsburg's had success over the years. You know, we're talking about a Southwest Conference school team there in the Six Rivers that has made deep playoff runs in the Wisconsin State Tournament. So it's kind of cool to see, hey, you got the best in small school football in Illinois kind of crossing borders and going up against one of the best conferences in small school football in Wisconsin. Who's better? And I like that. And on top of that, those games are going to become more must-win games for these NUIC teams as well, in order for them to get through this more vaunted gauntlet of what this conference appears as we head into 2024.
Yep. You nailed it. You encapsulated what is really fascinating about this conference. It's high-end competition week in and week out with a lot of teams that, a lot of teams that have had a lot of success over the years. It's every team has some kind of historic run in their past. Every team has that group that the alumni look back on and say, that was the team. We were the best in the best conference. That's what I love. And Stockton's one of those teams, right? For years, Stockton was a team that was going to be in the playoffs every year. They were going to be in the mix. They're down a little bit, but man, they just missed the playoffs a year ago. So I'm really interested to see kind of what they can do with, some returning, with a good number of returners here. Coach Downey likes their speed, doesn't know if they're as big up front, but what they lack in size, they may pick up with, strong, fast, athletes. So, to wrap it up with Stockton, I'm interested to see kind of how the season goes for them, because they were so close a year ago. But I think that wraps it up. Now it's the all-important prediction. Are we going to put ourselves on the line and make a pick who's going to win the conference? Mitch, we hadn't done this in years past, but we started it a year ago, and I think it's good. I think it's worth doing. So I guess the real question is, who goes first?
I'll go.
Oh,
and I tussled with it, and I kind of stepped on it early in the preview here when talking about Du-Pec. The only team in recent history, the past couple of years, that have ousted Lena for a conference crown a couple years ago. I like what they've got coming back. I just don't know if Lena lost enough to lose their spot at the top of the table. So while I think Du-Pec will be right there and maybe won't have many losses, I think maybe one of them will be to Lena-Winslow, and that will be the difference maker. So I will be boring and say that Lena-Winslow will win the conference again, but I think Du-Pec will be close. I think Fulton will supplant Forreston this year for third place. That's my bolder prediction. I think Fulton makes the jump to get up to that tier a little faster.
Okay, man, I thought you were going to be spicy and go with Du-Pec, but
my Rivermen, they know it. They have the talent to do it. I really do believe that. It's just I do like what Lena brings back, and I talked about it when we talked about their preview. Their defense is going to be strong, and I think that's going to be a really big key for the Panthers.
Yep, that'll be week 6 between Du-Pec and Lena-Winslow. If your predictions play out, that would be a very pivotal matchup. Kyle, you want to go, or you want me to go first? Me. He points right at me. All right, see, and I thought Mitch was going to go Du-Pec, so I thought I was going to be boring.
I really want to.
I thought I was going to be boring and say Lena-Winslow, so I think it's Lena-Winslow. I know I said it last year in the state championship game, and Camp Point Central did get the job done. I mean, we said somebody's got to beat them before I can, change my mind. Same with the conference. I'm going to go with Lena-Winslow. I think that their execution and the way they can grind through this schedule, which is so tough, they're battle tested. These kids are ready for the moment week in and week out. I'm going to stick with Lena-Winslow, and man, I know it's boring. No offense to Lena-Winslow, but it's like, I wanted to make a spicy prediction, but in my head, I just think it's Lena-Winslow. Kyle, I've rambled enough. What do you think?
So I'm looking back at last year, and granted, we're going into a new year, so it's something I don't like to do, because last year is last year. This year is a whole new team. But when you take a look at, like we've mentioned many times, the established program, the buy-in to everything that they do, and you look outside of the last 2 games of the year, every game that Lena-Winslow won last year was by 3 touchdowns or more against every opponent that is on their schedule minus Mineral Point. And they did not play Morrison, but they did play the team that beat Morrison and beat them by 30. Unless you're Coach Ahrens, I love the guy.
He did not predict himself to win the conference or his team.
He did pick Du-Pec. I will let that out there.
Okay.
Which is funny because he picked Du-Pec the last couple of years, actually. Which kind of shows you his level of respect that he does have for the Riverman program. And I know that he has respect for Forreston as well. But to me, I agree with what every other coach has said. Until you can dethrone the king is the pick. And that's Lena-Winslow. They are the king right now, and they have not left that throne yet.
Yeah.
I think to me that what'll be interesting to play out is that 2 through 5, because I think that will look a lot different with Morrison in the fold, with Fulton bringing a lot back. I think this conference can get. Let's see. I don't think it's a stretch to say they're going to get 5 playoff teams in. A wild card 6th team, but to me, again, just like Kyle said, if nothing else, it's, can you beat the king? That's Lena-Winslow. It's theirs until you take it. But for me, it's the jostling of between 2nd and 5th of, I'll say, Du-Pec, Fulton, Forreston, Morrison, how those 4 teams shake out in the standings.
Yeah, this conference, it starts, it's a shotgun start with Lena-Winslow and Morrison right away in week 1. And there's going to be so many intriguing matchups throughout the year. We've talked a lot about that week 1 matchup. Kyle, what matchups stand out to you? And Mitch, you can piggyback off that after he's done. Think about some matchups that you see along the way.
Well, really, for me, the biggest matchup I see right now that just has me tickled pink is that week 1 match, Winslow and Morrison. Looking down the road, I do feel that Du-Pec is going to be in the mix, but I look at Du-Pec's first 2 games against Stockton and EPC, and I mean, you go back to last year, and they're the same 2 teams that Du-Pec started off with last year. They snuck one out against Stockton in Durand, and they dominated EPC, but EPC was very young last year. So it's going to be interesting to see how they can get through weeks 1 and 2. Then you got week 4, and you got Morrison coming to Pecatonica. That there, to me, is another big game, because if Morrison can get that game, regardless of how the week 1 game goes, that's going to tell you a lot about playoff positioning for Class 1A. It's also going to tell you where Morrison stands within the conference as far as being in that upper echelon. If Du-Pec gets that win against Morrison, let's say Lena-Winslow gets that matchup against Morrison in week 1, then, like you guys were alluding to earlier, you got that week 6 matchup between Lena-Winslow and Du-Pec as well.
Yep.
Now, I don't want to count out Fulton and Forreston, but you got Du-Pec going to Forreston there in week 8, and you got Fulton in week 7 for Du-Pec. Likewise, you have Forreston and Lena-Winslow matching back up in week 9 once again. We've seen that matchup in that week 9 position many times throughout recent history. And even that week 5 game, Forreston at Morrison, to me, that is another huge game. But when I look at Forreston's schedule, week 1 there, Forreston at Fulton is another big game that can turn the tide on this whole thing. And you can't count, like we've talked about, you can't count out, in my opinion, you can't count out Galena, EPC, and Stockton being spoilers.
I think the game, for me, out of the games a game we haven't discussed yet, you look at Stockton at home against Eastland Pearl City in week 5. I think that one goes a long way for one of those teams making the playoffs. I think that's a huge game right in the heart of their schedule. Mitch, what else do you see? What games, maybe we've already mentioned it, but what games stand out to you?
Yeah, and I mentioned it early that I think the conference will come down to that week 6 between Du-Pec and Lena. But there's 2 other games that stand out to me. One is week 2 with Lena and Fulton, because if Lena can get past Morrison and Fulton in their first 2 weeks, that could set kind of set the stage for the rest of their year. But then I'm going back to Du-Pec and looking at week 7, coming off of that game against Lena-Winslow, win or lose, you play Fulton at home. You got them at home, but can you either keep the momentum going? Because I think Du-Pec will be undefeated going into the Lena-Winslow game. So if they win, can you keep that momentum going against a good Fulton team? Or if you fall to Lena-Winslow, can you pick yourselves back up and get back in the win column against a solid Fulton team? So if I had to pick one, just because I was boring with my conference prediction, and I think it's saying Du-Pec and Lena is a game of the year. I think that's kind of a cop out too. I'll say it's that week 7 Du-Pec hosting Fulton for both of those teams.
Yep. I love it. I think we nailed it. This is a full episode, but man, this might be one of the, I'm not even kidding you guys. I'm not just blowing smoke. This might be the best preview we've ever done. I'm going to put it out there right now. Might be the best season preview we've ever done. And now that's a tough task now to replicate, because I got Ty Taylor coming on to help me out with the Three Rivers Athletic Conference. And I got Matt Schuckman and Matt Randazzo and Corey Kuffler coming in for the Western Big Six Conference preview. So this is a high bar we've set, but this is a great episode. Thank you so much, Kyle. Your expertise, always valuable here on the podcast. I love it.
Yeah, I love coming on here. I appreciate the fact that you guys keep inviting me on at different parts. It's a lot of fun. Obviously, I enjoy talking football tremendously, and teaming up with you two is always it always gives me that joy and excitement, because I know that between the three of us, we're always going to come up with material to talk about to make it entertaining, not just for us, but for the people listening. So it's always a blast, and I appreciate it.
Well, Kyle, I got to give you a special shout out. I should have done it at the beginning of the episode. We are entering our 5th season of covering football here on View from the West podcast. And a big reason we're here doing this was because of the work you were doing years before that. I would watch your YouTube videos. I would make comments on YouTube, and you guys would answer me once in a while, which was nice, but, you were a big reason for us getting started. I know that, Mitch, loves getting in and hearing about the Northwest Upstate Illini, especially now that Morrison's in it. Now he's really in. But no, I appreciate all the work you've done over the years, and you're a big reason why we're here doing this. So the collaboration is great. We're grateful for it. So,
well, I mean, I can't say. I really do. I appreciate that a lot. And as far as, like you said, you get a reply every now and then. That's always been one of my biggest things. I didn't want to be like the traditional media that would post something and then not be responsive. I wanted to be able to interact with the people coming to entertain themselves with the football information getting put out on our different platforms. So thank you for being that guy that would show up and drop a line, even though you were not a Marquette guy. But it was awesome. It was a lot of fun, and I remember it was probably 2017 when Marquette made that big semifinal run in the second year.
Yep.
Is when me and you really started to have some interactions, and then to grow it to where we are now. And when you told me you were starting this up, yeah, I was one of your biggest advocates, still am. You guys are doing great work. Obviously, your stuff is reaching all parts of the state, which is tremendous, and it's really helped. It's helped me in one fashion, trying to get the NUIC more involved with statewide conversations. But on top of that, you're really getting the entire Northwest corner out there, and a lot of people appreciate what you two are doing, and it's awesome.
Great. Yeah. Well, this was an awesome episode. Again, I'll say it again. This was, I think, one of the best previews we've done. Mitch, are you about to embark off on a vacation here?
Yeah, hurricane pending.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll be setting, well, pun intended with the hurricane, we'll be setting sail to Florida. So yeah, that pending, we'll see if I'm on a couple of these upcoming preview shows.
Yep.
If not, you've got plenty of talent coming in with Ty for the track preview, and of course all of the WQAD boys and Schuckman for the Western Big Six. I wasn't even on that one last year, and that was a great show. So yeah, a little travel before school starts, before the season starts.
There you go.
But yeah, this is, again, as much as I'm looking forward to going on vacation, again, as these days and weeks count down to week one, boy, is it exciting.
Yeah. So I was going to say, I was bringing that up, your vacation, because yes. So this is our Northwest Upstate Illini 8-man preview. Now, in a couple days, we'll jumpstart 2 episodes in 1 week. So later this week, we'll have our Three Rivers Athletic Conference preview. I'll bring in Ty Taylor. He covers Mercer County, Orion, Sherrard, and Rock Ridge. Mitch, you may or may not be on that one. We'll see. Travel pending. But
yeah, I really want to. It's always fun talking to Ty, especially
Yep.
He's so passionate. If anyone compares to Kyle's passion for the NUIC. Ty has that with teams in the track. So it's always good to talk to him and get his insight.
So Ty Taylor will be on for the Three Rivers Athletic Conference preview coming later this week. Then a week from now, next Tuesday, will be the Western Big Six preview. I've already been in touch with Matt Schuckman, Matt from Muddy River Sports down in Quincy. I've talked to Matt Randazzo and Corey Kuffler from WQAD. They'll be on to give us the full perspective of the Western Big Six. Then we'll be back the following week on August 20th. That will be our Lincoln Land Conference preview. So the Lincoln Trail and the Prairie Land preview. Mitch, you should be back in the fold for that one, back and rested from vacation. And we'll get you back in on that one. And then it'll be go time. It'll be a season preview episode, and we'll be ready to go. So here we are. The countdown to kickoff is on. So Kyle, thank you so much again for being here. We appreciate it. We will talk to you throughout the season. Some of these nights we'll have to grab you in for an Instant Reacts podcast. And, after some of these games we've talked about, in this episode for sure. So, Mitch, enjoy your vacation, and we will also talk to you again soon.
Yep. Looking forward to it.
That'll do it for this week's episode of View from the West. Thank you so much for listening. I encourage you to go out to Apple Podcasts or Podbean and subscribe so you can follow along, and downloads will come automatically every week. You can follow along on Twitter at ViewFromWestPod. You can also email me if you're interested in being a sponsor, viewfromwestpod@gmail.com. Thanks so much. We'll see you next week.